Undercover boss gets salad, finds mold inside, and stops the shift immediately. He just wanted a simple salad for lunch. A portion of Riverside greens, the light dish marketed as picked fresh every morning, hand-tossed leaf by leaf. For Michael Foster, 50 years old, founder of the Harvest Table chain, it was the very dish he once crafted by hand, right from the backyard garden, back in 2007. And today he ordered that dish just like a regular customer. No one in the restaurant recognized the man in the gray shirt, silver strands in his hair, seated quietly near the window. He didn't want to be recognized. His shoes were worn. A baseball cap shaded half his face. A fake name tag reading Mick Kitchen Intern was clipped in his pocket. He wasn't here to eat. He was here to uncover the truth behind 3 anonymous emails sent to the CEO inbox, all within less than 2 weeks. 3 different senders. One shared warning: you should check the greens at Riverside. Someone's hiding something big. The produce here is no longer being inspected. Try the salad, but look closely at the leaves on the bottom. Michael had quietly read those messages in the dead of night, and this morning he decided to find out for himself. 11:32 a.m. Lunch shift had just begun. In the kitchen, the sharp rhythm of knives, the steady buzz of incoming orders over the intercom. No one paid attention to the man in gloves preparing the tray of greens. A female employee with red-orange highlights handed him a box of watercress. "You're Mick, right, the new guy?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "Here, salad number 3. Come on, let's go." Michael nodded. His fingers touched the clear plastic lid. A drop of water rolled down the rim and landed on his sleeve. Cool. Damp. Not what he remembered. He opened the box. The first smell wasn't of fresh vegetables, but the sour, trapped odor of old moisture. He lifted a top layer of greens, still fresh, but slightly uneven in color. Then he dug deeper to the 3rd layer and froze. Between strands of watercress and romaine were streaks of white-green mold growing thick around the stems. Not just in one spot. 3-4 patches, clearly visible. The mold had spread into the veins of the leaves, turning them sickly yellow. Michael leaned in, took a slow breath. A faint, acidic scent. A slimy, familiar smell. The smell of greens kept too long in poor conditions enough to cause food poisoning, if even a portion made it onto a plate. He turned to the woman who'd handed him the box. "This just came out of storage." She glanced over, shrugged. Yesterday. Still within date. Manager said to keep using it to meet today's quota." "Which manager?" "Carla, she's on shift now." "Why is something wrong?" Michael didn't answer. No arguing. No confrontation. Just quietly set the box down on the table. Then removed his gloves. The act was silent, but enough for 2 nearby staff to take notice. He stood up, took off his cap, walked straight out of the kitchen without a word, leaving behind just one sentence, spoken just loud enough to hear stop the shift. Now, a staffer called out behind him, "Mick, what do you say?" Michael didn't stop walking. He headed toward the main counter, where a few customers had just begun placing orders. He raised a hand to signal the front staff. "Sorry, we're pausing service. There's a problem in the kitchen. All guests please wait." The server looked at him, confused. "You are Michael," pulled the fake tag from his pocket, peeled back the thin sticker layer on top, revealing the metal badge underneath Michael Foster, founder and CEO, Harvest Table Group. The entire front hall fell into silence. Behind him, Carla, the shift manager, stepped out of the admin office, phone still pressed to her ear. She was about to speak until she saw Michael's eyes. She froze. Then he pulled a small zip bag from his pocket. Inside was the moldy lettuce leaf he had just picked up from the bin. He held it up to the light. "This is what you're mixing into the guests' food." A long silence followed. Then came murmurs from table 4. A young customer stared at her untouched salad and leaned in to inspect it. At that very moment, a young kitchen assistant standing in the back timidly glanced at Michael, then quickly looked down. He was still holding an unopened box of greens. Michael stepped closer. "What's your name, Dylan?" he mumbled. "You knew there was moldy lettuce in the kitchen." Dylan nodded very slightly. Michael stared straight at him. "Why didn't you say anything?" The boy trembled. "Miss, Carla said if anyone opened their mouth about ingredients, then don't bother coming back tomorrow." The room held its breath. Michael looked around. The truth wasn't just buried under lettuce. It lay in the silence forced upon them. In a kitchen that had forgotten who it was truly meant to serve. And he knew this story was no longer just about a salad. The wind swept down Fifth Avenue, carrying maple leaves in a hurried drift through a chilly late autumn morning. Sunlight slanted across the tall glass windows of the Harvest Table Riverside branch, casting a faint reflection of a man, standing at the door, his hand resting gently on the handle. Michael Foster, 50 years old, founder of this restaurant chain. It all began with a tiny kitchen and a promise to himself no dish gets served unless I'd feed it to my own family first. Back then, he picked the greens by hand, stirred the sauces himself, and scrubbed every chopping board with an old brush. But that was over a decade ago. In the past 5 years, the CEO role had gradually pulled him away from the kitchen, away from familiar aromas, away from the clang of pots and pans, and away from the shining eyes of servers when guests smiled in satisfaction. His life now was a whirlwind of expansion plans, investor meetings, and spreadsheets glittering with promises, until he received 3 emails, all anonymous. But there's no such thing as coincidence in 3 identical warnings. You should check the green storage at Riverside. Some things shouldn't be on guests' plates. They're hiding something deeper than you think. No name, no sender, but each sentence sent a chill down his spine. Riverside, the name stirred many memories. It was the first branch, where he once invited his mother on opening day, where he stood by the kitchen door wiping sweat with a worn apron, watching the crowd ordering Green Goddess, a dish he created himself for the very first time. But now Riverside was quietly slipping from the top. Over the past 3 months, online reviews had plummeted. Phrases like wilted greens, strange smell, mild food poisoning appeared more frequently in the comments. Refund requests on delivery apps tripled, and no one could explain why. Michael didn't want to rely on hearsay. He needed to see it with his own eyes, taste it with his own hands, and feel with his own heart what had gone off course. So he came back unannounced. No suit, no personal driver, just a light gray shirt, dark jeans, old sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low. New name, Mick Kitchen Trainee. He entered through the back door like any morning shift employee. A temporary badge labeled training staff, Mick was clipped loosely to his pocket. The first person he met was Carla, the shift manager. She had no idea who he was. Didn't bother asking. Just handed him a pair of gloves and pointed to the prep storage handle, these crates of greens. Dylan will take care of the rest. Michael nodded and got to work. His hands hadn't forgotten how to choose produce. His eyes still remembered how to spot the faintest bruise at a leaf's edge. And he started seeing things he shouldn't have in the very first hour. The greens weren't washed properly. The storage containers had light mold along the rims. The cold room no longer smelled of fresh produce, but of moisture, chemical cleaners, and lingering dampness. In the corner of the room, a young worker, a boy named Dylan, was fumbling with cherry tomatoes. Some of them were soft and leaking juice. But instead of discarding them, Dylan gathered them in one corner, clearly under someone's order. Michael said nothing. He wanted to observe more. But there was something he didn't expect. The familiarity of returning to an old place made the pain even sharper. The menu board still had his photo. A blurry picture pinned near the end of the cashier counter, the man who started it all here. And that was exactly what made the dishonest acts happening behind the scenes even more brutal. It wasn't just deceiving customers. It was a betrayal of the very spirit this place was built on. He remembered it well. Every leaf of lettuce used to be weighed with care. Every staff member had to attend 3 sessions on cleaning procedures. But today, no one even asked if he knew how to sort watercress. And that was the moment he realized no one remembered why they began anymore. In that moment, among crushed greens, a greasy smell, and moldy vegetables waiting to be brought out, Michael Foster understood this wasn't just a quality check. This was the final test for himself. Did he still have the courage to turn everything upside down and start fresh? The first lunch shift began with an unusual silence. Michael had been in the prep area since 10 a.m., sleeves rolled up, shoulders slightly hunched, just like any new kitchen worker. But inside him, every sense was sharper than ever. Carla, the shift manager, handed him a box of watercress to prepare the signature salad green goddess. A name that sounded elegant but demanded perfection in ingredients. The greens had to be crisp, evenly green, never wilted, and most importantly, no strange odors. Michael opened the box and immediately sensed something was off. A musty, sour note like damp storage in an old fridge. He reached in, lifted the bottom layer gently, and there it was. A pale white mold blended into the stems stuck along the bottom of the box. You didn't need to be a food safety expert to see this wasn't right. Michael frowned slightly and raised the box toward the overhead light. The beams cut through the thin leaves, revealing streaks of faded green and cloudy white, like the edge of a mushroom ring. He hadn't said a word when suddenly a hand pushed the box down. Carla. She stood there, arms crossed, voice tense. Don't make a big deal, Mick. Just toss it all together. The customers won't notice. Michael didn't answer. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he needed to hear more. He had to know, was this just a one-time slip or a habit deeply rooted in their operations? Carla saw his silence. She turned away and walked off as if nothing had happened. Michael remained still, one hand still lightly holding the box. But his gaze had changed. No longer Mick, the kitchen trainee. It was now the look of someone carrying a crack in his heart that had just begun to spread. He slowly peeled off one of his gloves. Cold crept into his fingertips. Not from the fridge, but from the trust he saw crumbling before his very eyes. Just then, Dylan, the young prep cook around 18, walked over holding a box of mushrooms. He was about to place it on the shelf, but paused when he saw Michael still holding the watercress. "Are you okay?" Dylan asked softly.
His voice trembled like he knew he was witnessing something he shouldn't.
Michael turned the box slightly and showed him the mold. Dylan's eyes widened. I think it's been like that since yesterday. But Carla said just leave it. No one checks anyway. Michael looked straight into the boy's eyes. There was no blame in that gaze. Just a heavy silence. "Have you ever tried telling anyone else?" he asked. Dylan shook his head. "I was scared. Last time a girl tried to report something. Carla told her if she opened her mouth again, don't bother showing up next week." Michael exhaled slowly, stunned. It wasn't just mold. It wasn't just a salad. It was a broken culture where silence was rewarded and honesty was punished. He turned back to the box, held it with both hands. No one else in the kitchen spoke. They kept working, but a few eyes had glanced over, saw that Michael was still standing there longer than usual, and his face now bore a look of quiet, undeniable reckoning. That was the moment he knew if he stayed silent any longer, he would become part of the betrayal. A few minutes later, Carla came back and saw that Michael still hadn't finished the salad. "Mick, you're still not done with that," she snapped, tilting her chin in frustration. Michael placed the vegetable box on the counter, his voice low but firm. "You know this produce is bad, so why didn't you toss it instead of using it?" Carla raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean bad? It's just a little old. Customers don't inspect every leaf. Besides, we need to cut costs. This is still within the expiration date." Michael looked at her long enough that she started to feel uncomfortable. He said nothing more, just bowed his head, and that was the moment he knew the game was over. But not for him, for the pretense that everything was still okay. Lunch shift ramped up at 11:45. Orders piled up at the prep counter non-stop. The dish list stretched all the way to the corner of the screen. Green Goddess, X3 Chef Seasonal Salad Gluten-Free Allergy VIP table. Needs a fully vegan dish. Michael stood at the veggie station, slicing per order, rinsing lightly before placing the mix into stainless bowls to send to the hot kitchen line. But he was no longer focused. Every movement, every command from Carla, every container of ingredients being pulled out, it all felt like he was examining each crack through a pane of glass. At 12:03, he noticed Lily, the young prep cook, around 19, who'd only been on the job for less than 2 months, struggling behind the sink.
She was holding a box of cherry tomatoes, frowning.
Michael could see it clearly. Half the box was soft, some leaking juice. Lily glanced around, thinking no one saw her, then quickly pushed the box into the trash bin beside the sink. But just 3 seconds later, Carla came over from nowhere, gently grabbing Lily's elbow to pull her back. No one heard what Carla said. You could only see her lips tighten, her eyes narrowing, and her finger pointing straight at the trash can. Lily lowered her head. 1 second of silence. Then, she picked the box of tomatoes out of the trash, gave it a quick rinse under cold water, and placed it on the counter as if nothing had happened. Michael stood still, said nothing, but he felt something inside his chest slowly breaking into pieces. Not because of the spoiled tomatoes, but because a girl not yet 20 had already learned that silence is how you keep a job. And the one who taught her, that was the very person once entrusted with preserving this restaurant's culture. 12:21. A VIP order was called in from the dispatch counter. Chef, seasonal salad, table 6. Guest is a social media influencer, asking for the best-looking salad today. Carla turned and pointed at Michael. Mick, this one's yours. Let's see what you've learned. Michael gave a slight nod. He walked over to the special prep area where pre-mixed greens were stored, opened the box. Immediately, a pungent odor rose up, not the crisp scent of fresh greens, but that sour tinge of heat, spoiled produce, just on the edge of mold. He used a spoon to lift the bottom layer. A long romaine leaf lay at the bottom, dark, wilted like wet paper. Along the edge, a band of bluish-white mold clung in thick silence, like an accusation. Michael didn't move the spoon again. He turned gently, lifted the box, and walked a few steps toward Carla. Still edible? He asked, trying to keep his tone even neutral like a new hire. Carla glanced at the box, shrugged. No one dies from a little mold. Get to it. We've got guests to serve. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Michael looked at her. For a long time. No anger. No confrontation. Just a look, as if he was trying to understand how this could be happening right here, in the very place that was once his dream. He turned around, walked back to the prep counter, but didn't pick up the knife. Instead, he removed his gloves. For the second time that day, no one noticed the gesture, until he stood upright, skipped the rest of the prep steps, and walked away from the counterbox of greens in hand. Carla called after him, Mick, where are you going? You haven't finished the dish. But Michael didn't stop. He walked toward the small office at the end of the hallway where the internal line connects to the regional quality control department. In his hand was the evidence. In his heart was clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. When he returned to the kitchen, no one spoke. No introduction needed. No business card required. Just the way he looked and the way people around him began to understand, this was no longer in Carla's hands. 12:47 p.m. 1 minute earlier, the Riverside kitchen was still running like every other lunch shift, busy, loud, flooded with requests from the service counter. But right after that, the atmosphere suddenly froze, as if someone had flipped the main power switch. Michael stepped out from the prep area, pulled off his gloves. His voice was clear enough but unmistakable. Stop everything you're prepping. Not a single plate goes out to a customer. Everyone froze. Knives paused mid-cut. Pans boiling on the stove. The order screen still lit up red with pending tickets. But no one moved. Carla, standing at the expo station, nearly lunged forward. What did you just say? Do you know what you're doing? Who gave you the right? Michael didn't answer. He removed his cap, then took off his glasses. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Dylan dropped the sauce ladle. Lily let go of the salad tray mid-toss. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Then Lily stepped back, hands still sticky with honey lemon, dressing her eyes wide. "Oh my God, you're Michael Foster." The entire kitchen fell silent. Michael looked around at every face. No anger. No rage. Just one thing in his eyes, a weighty, unmistakable disappointment. Carla's face turned pale, and she stepped back. Her lips moved as if to deny, I didn't know, I didn't think, that no need to think. Michael cut her off. He turned back to the veggie station and picked up the box of watercress. Inside were yellowing leaves, quiet patches of mold like silent accusations. He held the box high, turned slowly toward the kitchen. "This is what you've been serving customers. Not one wrong dish, not one bad day, but a system that allowed this to repeat." No one objected. The young staff stood still. The older ones looked away. Michael set the box down, walked slowly to the center table where Carla stood frozen. "I'll ask again, why were these ingredients still being used?" he said. Not loudly, but each word struck the air like a nail. Carla rushed out. "The supply truck didn't send new greens. The delivery was delayed. We had no choice. And that's why you let staff pressure each other into using spoiled food." "It wasn't pressure. It was just work tips for peak hours." Michael gave a soft laugh. "Not a pleasant one. You know who I am. You know I founded Harvest Table. But it seems you forgot the most important thing. I didn't open this restaurant to serve moldy vegetables to guests." Carla stayed silent. Now for the first time, Dylan spoke, voice small. "I'm sorry I noticed the veggies smelled bad, but I didn't dare say anything. It's not your fault." Michael turned to him, his voice calm. When fear becomes the rule, silence becomes a survival skill. The kitchen was dead quiet. Michael pulled out his phone, called the Quality Control Department directly. "I need someone at the Riverside branch immediately. Seal off all vegetable and fresh food supplies." He turned back to the staff. "Today, we're stopping all service for 3 hours. We will only resume once everything is inspected, and when I, the founder, am willing to eat what this kitchen serves." He looked around once more, his eyes piercing into every pair of eyes that were trying to avoid his. "This is the place where I once mixed every single salad bowl by hand. The place where my mother used to sit at table number 3, eating the green goddess and saying, 'Michael, this dish makes me want to live longer.'" His voice caught for a moment, just a little, but enough to make those around him look up. "And today you nearly served that dish to another mother with moldy greens in it?" Carla lowered her head. Lily turned away, her eyes welling up. Michael walked toward the door, but before stepping out, he turned back and said to everyone, "I'm not shutting this branch down. But from now on, it will no longer be run by fear. And all of you, you have 2 choices, either stay silent or stand on the side of truth." That afternoon, Harvest Table Riverside didn't serve a single customer. The kitchen came to a complete stop. Staff were temporarily dismissed, but most didn't leave the restaurant. They stayed on the waiting bench at tables 2, 3, and 5, quietly, eyes fixed on the kitchen door, where Michael Foster still remained. No one wanted to leave because they had never seen their CEO like this. At 1:40 p.m., the internal audit team arrived, 3 people wearing gray shirts with a small Harvest Table logo on the chest. One of them shook Michael's hand and said softly, "We'll inventory every item in storage, compare with the system, and document every abnormal ingredient." Michael nodded. "Start with the vegetable cooler and skip no compartment." 2 hours later, the report was on the table. 27 food containers showed signs of being past expiration. 7 of those had visible mold. 5 types of vegetables had no date labels. 3 types of spices had been diluted. And one more critical thing, the reporting system had been tampered with, falsifying delivery dates. Michael read every line. His face wasn't angry, but it had clearly gone cold. "No one double-checked any of this?" he asked. The audit team leader shook his head slightly. All reports indicated stable conditions. But in truth, this blind spot has lasted over 2 months. Michael didn't respond right away. He sat quietly with his notebook, the kitchen light casting shadows on his face, now a blend of firmness and self-reflection. By the end of the day, Michael called all remaining staff back into the main hall. No one was forced to leave. Though the air was still, everyone knew nothing could be hidden anymore. He stood in the dining room at table number 3, where his mother once sat on opening day. To his left was the audit report. To his right, the box of moldy watercress still on the stainless steel tray. He spoke. Not loudly, but each word was deep and steady. I didn't come here to scold, nor to condemn anyone. A long breath. Then he continued. I came because I received 3 anonymous emails, and all 3 were true. Every head lifted. I saw the rot in the smallest things. A moldy leaf, a crushed tomato box, an employee forced into silence. He paused, looking at Lily, the girl who'd washed vegetables all morning, who had kept her head down ever since the discovery. But what hurts me the most is that I let it happen, because I was gone for too long. The entire room stood frozen. We don't just serve food. We serve trust. And then he added something that made the entire room catch their breath. I once thought that if I built a solid system, everything would run itself. But I forgot no system is stronger than the person standing in the kitchen, truly caring about what the customer is about to eat. The atmosphere shifted, no longer tense, but heavy with emotion. Michael motioned for Carla to step forward. I'm not here to place all blame on one person, but whoever leads must be the first to be accountable. Carla didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded quietly. She knew the game was over. Carla will step down temporarily. An internal investigation will begin. If you can prove you were merely swept along in this, I'm willing to listen. Then he turned to the group of young staff, Dylan, Lily, and 3 others standing close together. I don't want Harvest Table to just be a name. I want it to be a place where young people dare to speak up when something is wrong, and are protected for having the courage to do so. He raised his hand, pointing at the whiteboard hanging in the corner where it read Outstanding Team Member of the Month. This month, I'll put up the name of the first person who dared to say there's something wrong with this vegetable. Dylan looked at Lily. Lily turned away, her eyes red. That person is Lily. The room didn't erupt in applause. It erupted in relief. A kind of relief many in this kitchen hadn't been allowed to feel for weeks, the feeling of being seen. 2 weeks later, an ordinary Monday morning in the Riverside neighborhood began with something unusual in front of the Harvest Table restaurant. A long line of people had formed, not because of a discount, not because of any viral promotion. They came for one simple reason: they wanted to witness the change with their own eyes. Michael Foster appeared at 810A. This time, no hat, no old coat, no badge that read Training Staff Mick. He entered through the front door, shaking hands with everyone waiting, not just customers, but also the newly retrained team. The kitchen lights were on from 6 a.m. The entire staff was present. A new independent food inspection system linked directly to the company's data center had been installed. Now, every box of vegetables, every tray of produce, came with a tracking code, origin date, received expiration, and all had to be signed off twice by both the team lead and a food safety officer. The first person to sign that morning was Lily. The same girl who once tried to throw away a bruised box of tomatoes now stood upright in front of the stainless steel panel, wearing a new apron, a neat shirt. Below the name tag Lily Prep, Lead, her hand gently rested on the clipboard holding the produce logs, handling it as if she were lifting something sacred. Michael walked up to her, placed his hand on her shoulder so lightly that no one noticed. You've changed this restaurant more than anyone else in the last 2 months, he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. And thanks to you, we remembered something I nearly forgot. Quality doesn't live in the brand. It starts with every single leaf you place on a plate. Lily looked up. There was a glimmer of moisture in her eyes, but no more trembling. She nodded. Inside the kitchen, a new wooden sign had been mounted just above the prep station, where every staff member passed by each day. On it was a handwritten line in black ink: quality doesn't live in the brand. It starts with every single leaf you place on a plate. Michael Foster, no logo. No advertising slogan. Just a reminder, simple, raw, unforgettable. At 10 a.m., the restaurant opened. The first salad plates were brought out. No flair, no exaggeration. But every ingredient had been checked by two sets of eyes, one from the preparer and one from the person responsible. And the most surprising thing wasn't that the food tasted better. It was the expression of the customers when they saw the server introduce the dish, with a confidence that wasn't trained, it had been reborn. An elderly customer turned to Michael, who was still standing at the counter chatting with guests. "You're the one who started this place, aren't you?" Michael smiled, not rushing to confirm. "We ate here 4 years ago and then stopped." Something had changed back then. But today it feels like meeting someone again, someone honest, genuine, and true to the original taste. Michael nodded, not to accept the compliment, but to thank them for coming back. At the end of the day, as the crowd thinned, Michael stood by the prep station, watching Lily teach a new staff member how to sort spinach leaves. The way she spoke, the way she trimmed the extra stems, the way she gently spun the mesh basket, it reminded him of himself 20 years ago. And he knew some things can be rebuilt. Trust is one of them.